Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to NDR. Today we're going to be taking a look at the latest and greatest that Samsung has to offer, the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, this is obviously a very powerful and capable device, and it certainly has the spec sheet to match a top-notch flagship smartphone in early 2019. But I've read many reviews online that hype it up to such an extreme extent that this is supposedly the best smartphone in the world right now, and this is the phone to beat that sets new standards going forward. Is that really the case? Will the S10 Plus live up to its hype? Let's find out right now. Alright, so first things first, we're going to unbox the S10 Plus because I haven't even opened up the seal as of yet. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts and opinions about this device and compare it to the last phones which I reviewed, which are the Huawei Mate 20X and the Mi Mix 3, both of which I am extremely happy with to this day. Now, as many of you might know from my previous videos, I actually have a long-running history with Samsung. I think I've probably owned just about every flagship phone they had, starting with the Samsung Galaxy S2. And they do make fantastic devices. I mean, there's really nothing more to say than that. They make really high-quality phones. They're always top-notch devices. They have everything that you expect a phone to have spec-wise in the given year that the device comes out. And again, their quality is immaculate, so you really do get what you pay for most of the time. Alright, so opening the box, the first thing that you see is the S10 Plus looking at you in all of its glory. And like I said, this is the premier model from Samsung. You can also get the S10 and the S10e, which are great phones in their own right. But I usually like to spring for the top of the line device if possible, just to see, again, what the manufacturer can offer if they're going all out. And I'm going to get it a little bit closer to the camera so you guys can see how amazing that rear cover looks on this device. Seeing as it's something that you use on a daily basis, it should definitely be something that brings you visual joy. I don't really mind rugged phones either because those serve a purpose. It just comes down to user preference really at the end of the day. But I do like the fact that smartphone manufacturers try to make their phones as beautiful as possible. The only exception is when that beauty comes at a serious cost, and that cost happens to be functionality or usability. But Samsung usually strikes a very good balance in that regard, as they tend to produce devices that are both visually striking and also very durable and very capable phones at that. Now, taking a look at the S10 Plus, again, I'm going to launch it up real quick. It has the latest Snapdragon 855 processor, which is going to offer you a bump, obviously, in usability and in snappiness in terms of the phone's performance. But what's really important to me is the step up in efficiency that these newer phones tend to have. So we're going to set this aside for now. I can see that underneath the top lid of the box is where we have the documents this time around, where you have the SIM card tray pin, and let's see if they have any goodies inside of here. Alright, so just papers this time around, no silicone case. I haven't actually watched any unboxing videos with this phone on purpose, just because I like to form my own opinions, and having owned so many Samsung phones, I'm definitely biased against Samsung, or I'm biased for Samsung. Again, I have a high appreciation for their approach to producing smartphones, and I really appreciate the quality and the thought process that goes into producing their phones. But I'm also painfully aware of all the quirks that Samsung phones tend to have, and all the reasons why some people don't like them all that much. Anyway, we'll get around to that a little bit later, but this particular model of the S10 Plus has 128 gigabytes of built-in memory and 8 gigabytes of RAM, and obviously there are other models available. There's also a model with 512 gigs of built-in memory and a terabyte of built-in memory as well that has a ceramic back. You do have to appreciate the way this phone looks. The amount of R&D that goes into producing any one of these devices is just astounding. Obviously, you have this beautiful 6.4-inch OLED display with rich and deep colors and a very crisp resolution, but there's one thing on here that just infuriates me, and it's that hideous hole punch display. For lack of a better word, it's a hideous feature to put on a phone. I don't know, I'm going to have to give this phone a few days of use in order to form a conclusive opinion on this hole punch, but honestly, they say that first impressions matter, and my first impression is just that this isn't a useful feature, and it's not an innovative feature, and it's just It's just bad design if you ask me. But again, I'm not knocking Samsung because they do some fantastic things with their phones, and the S10 Plus is no exception. And I'm going to keep on saying to all manufacturers that do this brave thing, that maintain the 3.5 millimeter audio jack. I mean, thank you so much, Samsung. Thank you so much for not going the Apple route and really not following all the other companies that have fallen prey to this horrible marketing gimmick that the 3.5 millimeter jack is outdated and that it's no longer needed. I mean, at this point, it's not really even an argument. I think if you ask just about anyone in the smartphone tech community, I mean, if you ask your next door neighbor if they would prefer that their phone have a 3.5 millimeter audio jack or be limited strictly to USB-C audio, anybody would say that they want the 3.5 millimeter jack. I mean, again, Samsung, thank you very much. Kudos to you. This alone is a huge reason to give the S10 Plus 5 stars in terms of user friendliness. And on top of that, it's also waterproof, or water resistant, I should say. It's IP68 rated. You can jump into the pool with it, but you really shouldn't though, because when they say that it's water resistant, they really do mean strictly water. Chlorine from a pool or salt from the ocean will still make its way into the device and will lead to corrosion and to damaging your phone down the line. So that's just something that you want to avoid doing if possible. But still, it's great to have that peace of mind that your phone will survive an impromptu dunk, or that it's fine to use when you're out in the rain, for example. All right, let's set this down for now and take a look at what else is in the box. Okay, so interestingly enough, take a look at this power adapter. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but the build has changed for as long as I can remember, and anybody else that has a Samsung phone, for as long as I can remember, the power adapter has come in this kind of lacquered, shiny plastic case, whereas this one looks like it's made out of sort of like a recycled plastic, like a bio-friendly plastic. Let's see, is there any difference in the power rating? So really, it's the same thing. They've just switched out the plastic that they're using when building their accessories. And the same thing can be said about this USB-A to USB-C adapter. It's also made out of this matte kind of non-shimmery plastic, so we'll see. Maybe it's a more eco-friendly plastic that they've gone for this time, which would be nice. All right, and what else is in the box? You also get your USB-C cable, which is no doubt very important. And let's see, what do we have here? Oh, okay, and this is nice. Thanks, Samsung, for including this as well. What they've given you is a micro USB to USB-C adapter, and I actually have a bunch of these lying around my home that I've bought third party, just because, again, if you've bought a phone or two or three in the past 5 years or so, you're bound to have dozens of micro USB cables lying around. And why let those go to waste? It's very nice that smartphone manufacturers are including these adapters in the box, so you can give new life to your old cables. So good going on that note as well, Samsung. And the last thing that's in the box is a nice pair of braided stereo earphones from AKG, which are usually of a very high quality. So again, thanks, Samsung, for including that in the package. The only thing that's really lacking in this box is a case. Any sort of basic case for this phone would have been a very nice addition. It's just always very nice to have everything that you need to start using your device right in the box. And again, I really appreciate both Huawei with the Mate 20X and Xiaomi with the Mi Mix 3, because they both had, although basic, but nonetheless they had cases inside of the box that served me quite well for about a week or so, until I was able to buy a better, or at least a custom case when talking about the Huawei Mate 20X. Alright, so we've taken a look inside of the box, and like I said, it really is a basic kit on one hand, but on the other hand, it's really everything you need to start using your smartphone. And it doesn't really differ much from anything else that you get from competitors. So again, essentially you have your phone, you have a power adapter, you have two included USB adapters, an A to USB-C and a micro USB to USB-C adapter, which is very nice, and of course the charging cable. So very nice kit. The only thing missing from here, in my opinion, is a silicone case that would have been nice to see in a premium priced device such as the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Now I'm going to move all of this stuff to the side, and we can finally get into the nitty-gritty, into the internals of this phone. I'm going to get it set up really quickly, and then I'll get back to you guys in just about 1 second. Okay, so I've switched the system language from Russian to English and skipped the first setup menus, and now we can finally get acquainted with some of the new functions of this device. Now, as you can see, there's no fingerprint scanner on the back of this phone or on the power button or volume rocker for that matter. That's because the fingerprint scanner is actually built into the screen. It's an ultrasonic fingerprint reader that's become possible thanks to the new Snapdragon 855. Now, let's get acquainted with how well it works, and it's pretty fast. I'm going to be very interested to see how accurate it is during day-to-day use of this phone. Alright, so now we're on the home screen, and the first thing that I want to do is check how quickly it reacts if I try to wake it up using just my thumb. Alright, so that's very quick. I could actually see this as being more than a gimmick, because again, I'm the biggest fan in the world of convenient features that you might actually use, and theoretically, I can't really think of the situation right now, but I guess it could happen that your phone might be lying on a table somewhere, and you might need to, for whatever reason, open it up with just one finger, unlock it with one finger without actually picking up your device, and that is possible with the Samsung S10 Plus and all the other new phones coming out with fingerprint scanners built into the screen, whereas with my Huawei Mate 20X, for example, there's no way to unlock it with one finger without picking it up and touching the capacitive fingerprint scanner on the back. Obviously, I could type in my password, for example, to unlock it, but that's a different story. Anyway, I could see that being useful. It works fairly consistently and quickly as well, so no issues with it whatsoever. It isn't groundbreaking, however, so it's not going to change the way you think about your smartphone. I know for myself and for many other users as well, it really doesn't matter where you have your fingerprint reader. But that being said, if you do add new features, gimmicky features or not, you have to try to make sure that you're not hurting your old user base, even if you're doing something that might potentially help newer customers, and that's the case with this fingerprint scanner. So again, it might come in handy for some users. It might be a lot more useful and a lot more convenient, but it definitely doesn't hinder the rest of us that don't really care. So that's what I'm really going to talk about, what I like and what I don't like about this phone more than anything else, because opinion is all it comes down to with these new devices. They're all generally so powerful and so capable. They all generally have fantastic specs, fantastic processors, really capable cameras that are more than able to take breathtaking shots in a lot of scenarios. So it comes down to being really, really picky and choosing the things about a certain manufacturer or a certain phone model that you may or may not like. So the next thing that I don't like about this phone is the Bixby button. And everybody has said it, and I'm going to say it as well. I just don't think Bixby is that great an option as far as AI assistants are concerned. It's really a hit or miss kind of service, so I never use Bixby, and I definitely don't want to have a dedicated button on my smartphone for something that I never use. But thankfully, both Samsung has implemented a way to remap this, and even though you can't use Google's Assistant through their remapping software, you can find third-party workarounds to get this button to work to your liking. Now, it's hard to talk about Samsung phones, or at least their flagship smartphones, without mentioning their screens, and Samsung does make really, really fantastic panels for their smartphones. They are ahead of the game in a lot of ways. Everything is very bright. The colors are perfect. The resolution is perfect. But you do have to keep in mind, and a lot of users will overlook this, the fact that out of the box, your display is generally set to Full HD+. So it's not using that full, nearly 4K resolution that the screen is capable of achieving. And if you do switch over to that higher resolution, it's going to be very, very taxing on your battery. So I'm fairly certain that quite a few users will leave their screen resolution at its stock Full HD Plus setting, just because this is something that might get overlooked when you're setting up the phone and looking through all the menus. But I'm going to switch it over to the maximum resolution for now, just for the sake of this video. Alright, so now I've switched it out to the maximum resolution, and honestly speaking, I can't really tell a difference with the screen. I mean, the Huawei Mate 20X that I have right next to it for comparison's sake is so much larger, and it has a lower resolution screen, but I mean it's just very difficult to tell that there's any difference whatsoever. It seems like at this screen size, anything beyond Full HD Plus is nearly indiscernible. So thankfully, I have absolutely no regrets about deciding to make the Huawei Mate 20X my main phone, because I'm still completely in love with this screen 4 months later after first using it. So what a fantastic device. Anyway, back to the S10 Plus. Now, while we're on the topic of screens, I did mention before that there isn't any sort of case included with the S10 Plus. There is, however, a screen protector that's applied from the factory. Samsung actually guarantees that for 90 days of use, which is pretty nice. Again, anything that you get additionally with your phone, especially when you're paying above $1,000 for your device, any accessories or freebies that might make your device more usable or functional are extremely important, and they add to the perceived value of the device. So again, with the S10 Plus, I really like the fact that they include headphones. I like the fact that have 2 adapters in the box, and I also like the fact that the phone has a screen protector out of the box. Very nice one, Samsung. Kudos to you all around. The next much hyped and talked about feature of this phone, and probably one of the first things that they'll tell you when you look at this device in a Samsung store, is the fact that it has pass-through wireless charging, and they call it power share, I believe, wireless power share. So you set it down on the table, and then you place any wireless charging capable device on the back of your phone, and it should start charging. There it goes. So in this particular case, my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus is actually wirelessly charging my Samsung Gear watch. So that's a nice function to have, no doubt. It's a nice function. Is it useful? No, it's stopped working for some reason. I'll figure that out later. Is it useful? I'm sure in some cases it might be useful, but again, just as with the in-screen fingerprint reader, it's not a hindrance to you. If it's something that you don't need, it's not going to bother you in any way, and they didn't take away from the functionality of the S9, for example, in any way in order to make this work. So, in my particular opinion, I think that this is a very gimmicky feature. You know, essentially because you're not going to be charging anybody's phone this way, because, well, for one, both of your phones are unusable if you decide to charge them this way. And two, the Samsung Galaxy S10 isn't exactly a power bank. It doesn't have a 10,000 or 20,000 milliampere hour battery. It's probably going to be enough to last you a full day's worth of use, but it's definitely not enough to start running around and charging all of your friends' phones wirelessly with. So really the only situation where I see that being useful is if you know that you're going to have about a half an hour or so worth of free time when you're not planning on using your phone, and you could put it down on your desk and charge your Galaxy Watch or charge your wireless headphones with it. But it's just hard to imagine that kind of situation actually happening, simply for the reason that any time that I could place my phone down somewhere and leave it and forget about it, and when you're at home or in your office or in your car, you have a charger anyway. This is definitely a gimmicky feature in my opinion, and it's a useless feature in my opinion. So Samsung doesn't get a plus for it or a minus really for it, again, because it's not hurting users that don't need this gimmick in the first place. Now, as far as other functionality of this phone, I'm not going to go over the entire system UI because it's very similar to what we've seen before. There's just no need to go in depth about everything that you can find here. The only thing that I'll say is, again, I love that Android is coming closer and closer to providing full-on night mode system-wide. So now all of your system settings can pretty much be switched to a black color, which is great. One, because it's easy on the eyes, and two, because it saves quite a bit of your battery usage, especially with a nice AMOLED display like this one, because they're very good about saving power as long as you have darker content being displayed on your screen. Now, as far as going into some of the other details about the system, there's really only one more aspect of it that really merits being mentioned. Actually, two. Now, the first one of them is the camera, and we're going to talk about this in great detail because this is important. And the second aspect is price. So again, that's also always very important for me when I'm reviewing my phones. All the rest of it with the Samsung Galaxy S10 it just feels the same. It's so similar to the S9, to the S8, to the S7. If you're coming from any of those phones, nothing on here is going to blow you away, okay? And don't listen to anybody that says otherwise, that this phone is going to change everything for you. It's the same thing. It's basically the same thing. All right, so now let's talk about what actually has changed with this device. And this is something that actually really needs to change with every new reiteration of a flagship phone. The smartphone camera is very important. It's something that we use on a nearly everyday basis, and for some of us, our smartphone cameras are our main cameras. Many people have completely forgone DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, and they shoot video, they shoot photo strictly on their phones, even for professional use. So these cameras are very, very important, and their quality is of extreme importance to a lot of users. Now, in the case of the Samsung Galaxy S10, you have a triple camera unit, which has become the standard across the smartphone world. So you have a 12 megapixel variable aperture main shooter, and that's coupled with a 16 megapixel ultra wide camera sensor, as well as a 12 megapixel 2x zoom telephoto lens. So it's a very nice unit, and again, it's very similar to what we've seen across the industry, and it's also very similar to what I have, for example, in the Huawei Mate 20X. Now, this is actually a very versatile and useful setup. I personally thought that this would be gimmicky before I used my Huawei Mate 20X, because I've always been a one camera sensor on a smartphone kind of guy. I actually really love the way that Google implemented their cameras on their Pixel series of phones, because you have a rather large sensor for a smartphone, at least, with a low pixel density, and you have a lot of software optimization that goes into making that one camera sensor do wonders as far as smartphone photography again is concerned. But I have to say that I have used both the telephoto lens on occasion, and I've also used the ultra wide lens on occasion when I want to have that extra kind of punch in my shot. So all of these camera sensors really have a place in the smartphone world, and I don't see this being a gimmicky feature. This is definitely something that's useful for smartphone photographers, and I just really wish that smartphone manufacturers would go out of their way to make sure that each one of these sensors was as optimized as possible for the end user, and that they wouldn't stop supporting and innovating as far as the software side of things goes a couple of months after the phone is released. Because again, if you take a look at the Pixel devices, Google continues to update their camera software months and months after release, even years after release. The camera software is still getting better, and you continually get better and better quality shots out of your smartphones, even though they've already been on the market for years. So that's something that I wish that Samsung and other manufacturers would continue to do as well. So again, the front camera, very high quality shooter. You can tell right away, you don't even need to pixel peep. I can tell just by the picture on the screen that you can see every pore and pimple on my face, which may or may not be a good thing for you depending on what you need your camera for. But I don't really care about front cameras. I never use mine on my phone. That's why, like I said, I don't need the notch. Really, I could have done without a camera in general on the front of my phone, but I may be an exception to the rule. I just don't care about front-facing cameras that much. What's really important is the rear camera, and again, the main shooter on here is going to be very capable. As it's come to be expected of Samsung, overall picture quality, color accuracy, and clarity are spot on. There's really a lot that you can do with the photos straight out of this camera. I'm talking about the main shooter right now. They do capture a lot of detail, and the images are very crisp, and there's very little noise to speak of when you have adequate lighting. And switching over to the telephoto sensor or the wide-angle sensor gives you the expected results without losing too much quality in comparison to the main shooter. Close-up shots and macro photography look great on this camera, well, at least as good as they can on a smartphone, and the scene detection works fairly well, although I prefer to leave this off on all of my phones, the Huawei Mate 20X included. What did surprise me is the lack of a dedicated night mode. In the case of the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3, the Huawei Mate 20X, and Google's Pixel lineup of phones, you have a separate night mode that you can engage on your phone, which essentially allows you to take multiple photographs in rapid succession and stack them in order to get a higher quality image when there is little light available. Surprisingly, on the Galaxy S10 Plus, this mode does exist. It's called the bright night mode, but it can only be engaged through the automatic scene detection. So the phone needs to decide that you're in night mode, and then it will take a photo. But I found that getting this to work is hit or miss. What is surprising to me, though, is the quality of the photos from the bright mode from Samsung, they're not nearly at the same level of quality that you get with night mode from Google or from Huawei, so I do not see this being a contender in low light photography. But if you don't take too many photos in low light conditions, this isn't really going to cause issues for you, because otherwise the camera is a very high quality, very capable unit that's going to take fantastic photos, which are bound to get you many hundreds of likes on Instagram. Alright, so to reiterate what I've said so far and give you guys my conclusive opinion on the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. This really is a fantastic device all around. Samsung has in many ways perfected the aspects of cell phone use that are very important to us as daily users and power users, and they continue to perfect their idea of a smartphone year after year. So I'm very happy with the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. I love the build quality, I love the finish, and obviously the OS optimization is better this year than it was the year before. That being said, there are several gimmicky features that have been added to this phone. The power share feature would be one of them. I don't like the pinch hole camera, but along with that, there are also several things that are very nice and could be very useful to you. So it's very nice, and it's still very refreshing to see the 3.5mm jack. It's very nice to see stereo speakers, even though they have the strange front firing / side firing stereo speakers set up. And it is very nice to see IP68 water resistance on a phone, because a lot of manufacturers have kind of been skipping over water resistance in the last couple of years, which is very strange. It doesn't make sense to me. It kind of feels like a step back. The in-screen fingerprint reader is also a very nice piece of technology, and I can see that being useful for a lot of users. But, and this is a big but, the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus is a very expensive phone. Here in Russia, at least, it retails for 76,000 rubles, which is about $1,100. And again, I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to say it, that's too expensive for a smartphone, in my opinion. And these functions that Samsung has kind of forced into the newest iteration of their S series, while they may be the latest and greatest, they're not exactly very necessary to an end user. Really, there are 4 parameters that are very important to me as a smartphone user. Those would be: 1, screen size. So I need the biggest size screen possible on my cell phone, and for now, until folding smartphones are actually something that you can buy, the Huawei Mate 20X is still the way to go. It's still the biggest screen available on a smartphone today. 2, I need a good camera. I need a high quality camera unit on my phone, especially one that's at least more or less capable of shooting in darker scenes, so shooting closer to nighttime, shooting in the evening time. And again, the Huawei Mate 20X has a fantastic camera, but the same can be said about just about every other flagship smartphone coming out in late 2018 or in early 2019. They all have fantastic cameras, and they will all serve you very well. The third issue that's generally important to me is overall performance. And I don't mean in the sense of benchmarks and having the fastest possible phone out there. I need a phone that consistently doesn't lag, doesn't force quit, doesn't have apps freezing and crashing, and a phone that works as fast as I do. So that's as snappy as I am switching over from different apps. If the phone gets in the way of my workflow, that's a problem. But really, again, performance hasn't been an issue on smartphones, on mid-tier and upper-tier smartphones at all for the past couple of years. And again, it's not just flagship phones anymore. All of these devices, all of the smartphone manufacturers that are so used to being the kings of the smartphone world, they're facing a lot of competition from companies that are making budget phones or mid-tier phones that are very competitive, and they're competitive not just in price, they're actually competitive in specs as well. And that brings me to the last point, which is price, and this has really become a deciding factor, and more of a deciding factor in recent years, because again, smartphone prices continue to rise, and as they do, I think that what's on offer from smartphones hasn't really been keeping up. So prices have been growing steadily by about $100 or so every year for the past couple of years. And what you get in return from these top-tier phones, well, it really isn't that much. You continue to get incremental increases in the quality of these smartphones. And again, with the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, this comes in at about $1,100 here in Russia, whereas I bought my Huawei Mate 20X, and this was in December. for about $910, I believe, and I bought my wife's Mi Mix 3, which is a very good competitor for these two phones. It even beats these phones in a few aspects of user functionality. I bought that phone for, let's see, what was it? It was about $500, I believe, closer to $600. So much cheaper, about half the price of the Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, taking that into consideration, taking price into consideration, it's becoming more and more difficult for me to recommend such expensive phones to my friends, to my family. And it's very difficult for me to recommend a phone such as this to you guys as well, because honestly, myself, I'm more and more inclined every single year, I don't even switch phones every year anymore. I'm more and more inclined when I do switch out my daily use phone to a new device, to switch over to a more budget-friendly alternative, because it just doesn't make sense to break your budget over a phone which isn't really going to differ in too many ways from a device that you can get for 30 or 40% cheaper. While this is a fantastic device, obviously a feature-packed device that's going to serve you very well if you decide to spring for it, if money isn't an option, again, go ahead. If you're a big fan of Samsung, if you're a fan of switching over to the new series phone every single year, or if your carrier plan provides for that, for example, then more power to you. Fantastic. But if you're a very keen buyer, or if you're very interested in getting the best deal for your dollar every single time, I would really advise that you take a good hard look at all the models that are available in the market today, and not just the models from early 2019 either. Take a look at all the phones that have been released in the past 5 or 6 months, and do include Chinese phones like those on offer from Xiaomi, for example, because they're just so much cheaper, and it makes so much sense to buy one of those devices. And honestly speaking, until one of the more well-known manufacturers in the world like Samsung or LG or Sony make a device that's capable of competing with the Huawei Mate 20X, I just don't see myself switching out of this phone as a daily driver. And as far as the S10 Plus is concerned, it's going to find its forever home with one of my relatives, and I'm sure they're going to be very happy with their device, and it's going to serve them well for years to come. But again, like I said, the three S devices that came out this year, the S10 Plus, the S10, and the S10e, should all probably be about $100 to $150 cheaper for them to actually be competitive with other similar devices in the smartphone market right now. But if you happen to be someone that's really locked into the Samsung ecosystem, if you're somebody that doesn't really want to switch over to another manufacturer, that doesn't like to try totally new things, then I can completely understand and support your decision to spring for the S10 Plus as the best smartphone available from Samsung as of today. As far as I'm concerned, I still think that the Huawei Mate 20X is the phone to beat, at least if you like large phones. I know that not everybody does. But nonetheless, it's been very interesting taking a look at the Galaxy S10 Plus, and I do want to say again, Samsung has done a great job building this phone. And I want to say thank you to Samsung for saving this headphone jack. Good on you, Samsung, for not following the pack. Other than that, I'd like to thank you very much again for watching, and I hope to see you soon on another normal day in Russia.